Hey everyone, this is Laura Gadenik with Laura Gadenik Astrology, and I'm here to give you the astrology update for the week of June 22nd through the 28th, 2020. Okay, so here we are. Here's the chart. And starting on Monday, um, on the 22nd, we have Neptune right here stationing retrograde. So you can kind of see this little S that stands for station. And stationing retrograde means stopping in the sky and turning around and moving backwards. And once again, this isn't actually happening in the sky. This is just what's happening from our perspective on Earth. And astrology is based on it's based on the symbolism of what we see from our perspective on Earth. Just to make that clear. And so Neptune is stationing at 20 degrees of Pisces and will remain in retrograde, meaning it'll continue moving backwards until November 29th of this year. So it's not uncommon. It's actually quite common for the slower moving planets to go retrograde for like half the year every year. So this isn't a big deal. It just means Neptune's doing its thing. And it's going to move retrograde until about 18 degrees of Pisces. So, and then it'll turn station direct and start moving forward again. So if you have any planets in your chart between 18 to 20 degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, or Sagittarius, so these are the mutable signs, then this might be kind of a continuation of being a little bit of a doozy for you, because that's kind of what Neptune tends to do. Is it can create confusion, fogginess, making things not super clear. It can also feel enlightening and inspiring, and like you're seeing the world with rose-colored glasses, or you're having like a spiritual experience. It kind of depends on where this is happening for you, and what planets are involved and what those planets rule in your chart, because additional topics would be brought up. But in general, this would be most kind of challenging for the mutable signs, but also could be really inspiring and hopeful and idealizing and beautiful for the water signs. Because if you have planets at between 18 to 20 degrees of Pisces, Scorpio, or Cancer, then this would be making a trine to those planets, and that you would get more of the kind of positive, nicer qualities of Neptune, ideally. I mean, not always, but so that is Monday the 22nd. The next thing that's happening, which is pretty big, is on Thursday. Venus is stationing direct. So you can see this S here. So S always equals stationing. And she's stationing direct at 5 degrees of Gemini. So the last time that Venus was here at the same degree was April 10th. So it's been several months by this point, or I guess maybe like 6 weeks, but still. And we're back at this point where Venus was on April 10th. And so now is our chance to redo the Venusian things that we haven't been able to do, or that have gone awry, or that have been challenging since April 10th. So now we get a chance to redo those Venusian things. So Venus in general in astrology is associated with love, beauty, relationships, connection. She is the planet of sweetness, literally like sugar. But also sweetness of life. What she asks us, what do you love? And when she's in retrograde, the question becomes, do you still love that? Do you still love it? Do you still want to do that? Venus retrograde, and I've talked about this a few different times, will bring up conflicts in relationship, because Venus is normally about uniting and harmony and creating bridges to each other, creating connection. But when Venus goes retrograde, those things also go retrograde in a sense. And there's this opportunity to reevaluate, redo, like do it over again. And So, right now we're getting that chance to kind of move forward and actually start doing the part, the resolve, right? Venus retrograde, oftentimes, if you're in a relationship, this is where kind of some deep rooted issues maybe in the relationship might come up. This is a time where there's not as much harmony necessarily in relationships. Venus asks us when she goes retrograde, is this relationship working for you and me? Are we both getting what we want? Are we both happy? Are we both experiencing joy with this situation? How can we make this better for both of us? Is it time to split up, to break up, to go our own ways? Or is it just time to reevaluate and to reassess the direction of our relationship, or how things are functioning, how we're working together? Are we working together harmoniously? Are we working together in a cooperative manner? um, am I happy? Are you happy? Venus really asks us, are you happy, and do you love it still? You can apply that to almost anything. So we get a chance to redo until July 29th, and that's when Venus will reach 21 degrees of Gemini again, and that's where she first stationed retrograde. And so we have about a month, maybe a little over a month, to kind of work with those energies. Let's see, Venus retrograde, I talked about this last week. She provides a deeper look into relationships, conflicts, and also into just how we get along, how consensus works, consent, Venus is a planet having to do with women, with the feminine archetype. And so conflict specifically might have involved maybe you and women in your life in some way, or maybe women in your life who've been in conflict, especially these past couple days, because Venus retrograde has been in retrograde while being ruled by Mercury, which is also retrograde currently. And so there's all sorts of, conflicts coming up, or, there could be conflicts coming up with regards to miscommunication, like not feeling understood, not understanding someone, making assumptions, because Mercury rules over communication. So that could be especially a theme that's been kind of going down over the past week or so. So yeah, how do we get along? Basically, is what Venus asks. Do we love it? Are we happy? Um, Venus is the sweetness, joy, the happiness, the love, the unity, the peace. And retrograde, she's kind of the antithesis of these things. She's the lack of sweetness, the lack of joy, the lack of happiness, the lack of peace, the lack of unity. And she kind of lets us reevaluate all of those things, all of those topics. So what happens when Venus starts moving forwards again is, we get a chance to redo. The sweetness will return at a semblance of normalcy, back to, I would say, pretty normal, um, let's see, conflicts in relationship with other women, this might be a time, especially until April 10th, when those conflicts are being worked on to be resolved, so that we can get back to Venus's goal of being sweet and peaceful and harmonious. She'll ask us, what have you learned more about love? What have you learned about love? So that's a pretty big thing happening on Thursday the 25th. On Saturday, actually, maybe Well, it'll be Saturday slash Saturday night slash Sunday morning. Mars is moving into Aries. So this is a big deal. Mars usually spends about 6 weeks in a sign, but this year Mars is going to go retrograde in Aries, which extends Mars's stay in Aries from 6 weeks to 6 months. So Mars only goes retrograde once every 2 years or so. So it's not like a Mercury retrograde, which happens like 3 times a year. It's a pretty big deal. And we're moving from Mars in Pisces to Mars in Aries. So this is moving from Mars in a yin water sign that's very connected with emotion to a yang fire sign. And Mars is strong in the sign of Aries. Mars is in dignity here, is what we say. Mars rules over Aries. So basically, Mars can do whatever the hell Mars wants to do here. um, and, you know, kind of going back to that idea of like, what is it like for Mars moving from water to fire? So if we think of Mars as our pace in the world, how we take action, how we take initiative, how we are motivated, how we fight and defend, Mars in Pisces was about fighting for the dream, the ideal, the vision. Mars in Pisces was about fighting from a place of emotion and compassion because Pisces is a water sign, and all water signs are associated with emotion, as well as memory, bringing up um, wounds from the past, wounds from our history. Um, and on a personal level, because there's always, astrology is always affecting us both on a macro kind of collective level and on a personal level and on a variety of other levels, because you know you could have a chart for anything. Any moment in time is significant. um, so, on a more personal level, Mars and Pisces could have been challenging for you. You might have felt kind of slow or a little bit sluggish, or maybe, it's kind of like this idea of like running through water. Like, how fast can you really go? And Mars is a planet that usually wants to go fast. Um, it's a fiery planet, and so it could have been kind of frustrating, depending on your personal chart. Like if you are normally with the person with Mars and Aries, for example, Mars and Pisces might have been very challenging. um, but Mars and Pisces is really about fighting for and defending for something that you believe in. It's all about what feels right. What feels right. And so, not to say that those qualities aren't present when Mars moves into Aries, but we're kind of moving from Mars in Pisces, kind of more from a feeling, emotional memory perspective of old wounds, to a Mars in Aries is like, okay, now what do we do about it? Let's take action. Let's like get going. Mars in Aries is fiery, it's passionate, it's impatient, it's quick, it's decisive, it's impulsive. He's intuitive here. He's bold, he's courageous, he's the martyr, he's explosive, he's eager, he's brave. Mars is the warrior. Mars is the warrior archetype, and he's at home in Aries, so he's doing all the things that he wants to do, which is to be all of those qualities that I just mentioned. So I know Mars in Pisces has been really intense. We started, Black Lives Matter really uh, amped up, and we had a lot of injustices to Black people and people with brown and Black skin. And we've had to really face the wounds of our past as a society, especially in the U.S. I guess I'm talking specifically, and we've had to fight for an ideal, like what does a better world look like? Um, and so when Mars moves into Aries, it's going to be, even amped up even more. Like I'm honestly kind of like I'm both curious and excited and a little bit nervous. for Mars to move into Aries, because it's going to be like Mars in Pisces, but on steroids. We're going from a yin water sign to a yang masculine fire sign. So everything's going to be more explosive, like a little bit extra. Aries is still very much so a sign all about defending and protecting and fighting for, like wanting to save. There is that martyr quality for sure with Aries. So the themes will continue. The only difference is that, not the only one, but a huge difference is that Mars is going to be retrograding in Aries. So we'll be spending 6 months in Aries. And, I'll talk about the retrograde, of course, later as we get closer to it. But just in general, Mars will be retrograde in Aries from September 9th through November 14th. And when Mars is retrograde, he's not a happy Mars. Mars likes to move forwards, likes to get things done, likes to take action, likes to, get into fights, likes to be, move in a direct way, but when Mars is going backwards, it's like you're literally backtracking, or he's literally backtracking. He's having to go back over, old territory that he's already traveled through. And, once again, there's that quality of redo, 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 redo. And if Venus in retrograde was like, oh, all of a sudden we don't have harmony, we're testing, our consensus is being tested, can we have peace? What does peace look like is essentially Venus in retrograde, right? But with Mars in retrograde is more like, what does war look like? What does fighting look like? What does defending and protecting look like? What Mars asks us, what do you want? Venus asks, do you love it? Does it bring you joy? Does it bring you sweetness? What have you learned about love? Mars asks, what do you want it still? Will you fight for it? Will you defend? Um, you know, yeah, it's going to be a totally different tone, and it's going to be more angry. It's going to be more intense. It's going to be more frustrating. But, of course, as with any transit, I always, even though, not to discount the challenges that certain transits kind of put on us, or I don't know if they put it on us, but we experience certain challenges with various transits, but I always think there's something behind it. There's always maybe a motive the planet has to help us learn something as a collective or even in our personal lives. So essentially, when Mars goes retrograde in September through November 14th, we'll want to move forward and take action, but we can't. There's this sense of being held back or limited in some way. We're stopped in our tracks. And if there's anything Mars hates more than anything, it's being stopped. So, that's kind of, I'll get into more of that as we move forward and get there. Let's see. The last thing that's happening, which is I'll just mention it pretty briefly. As Mars moves into Aries, he's going to be making a sextile to Saturn in Aquarius at 0 degrees of Aquarius and 0 degrees of Aries. This would be a good time to work on something that you need to get done. This would be a good time to work on something that requires staying power, because Saturn is the planet of commitment and integrity and time and age, and being able to do something with discipline and commitment. And Mars gives you that oomph. Mars gives you that energy to like go for what you want, and to take action and to make decisions. And sextiles are sweet. It's a sweet aspect that brings ease and harmony, and basically they're the type of aspect that we need to take advantage of, because we're not necessarily presented with a conflict that we need to adjust to or face, but we're provided with an opportunity to do something successfully, essentially. So that I think does it. Let's see. So I will be back next week with another update as always. And if you feel like it, comment and let me know how the week goes. I'm really sorry that my face is like white right now. I will do better next time. Okay. Have a good week, everyone. Bye.